Alright guys, so we've been talking a lot about adding content using various brushes and the geometric tool. We can also subtract material by using the eraser tool. Looks like a little eraser. It's about 8 down from the top. You can change the size of it here. So I can make this bigger or smaller. By the way, if you want to change this number on the fly with your keyboard, you can use the U key to go down and the I key to go up. I'd actually find it faster just to do it by hand, but you can do it that way. Or use those in connection. Oops. And I can just erase my content as such. Okay. Another thing we can do is, because this is a raster, or it's pixel based, what that means is we can actually take a selection of it and move it. So you might have done this in a program like Photoshop or Clip Studio Pro. I'm in Photo P right now, which is kind of a similar program to Photoshop, where if I make a selection, I can take it and just kind of move the pixels around, like I'm doing here. Okay, we could do something similar inside of Tahoma. So if I come in here, I'm going to click on this thing called the selection tool. Looks like an arrow. And right now I have this kind of shape here. And what I'm going to do is just click and drag to form a box. By doing so, it makes a selection. And I can then click and move my part around. Creating the selection also automatically allows me to transform it, which means I can do things like scale it, smaller or larger. If you put your cursor just a little bit beyond the edges, you'll notice that I'm getting this double-ended arrow here. This means I can rotate this selection as such. If you want to be really specific in your rotation, there's actually an exact degree amount right up here. So if I wanted to say, rotate it exactly 45 degrees, I can do that. Or I can use this little button. It'll rotate in increments of about 90 degrees. All right, so I can make selections. I can move them around. I can scale. I can rotate. By default, that was sort of, I make these rectangular selections. If you want to make a non-rectangular selection, what you can do is go under Type up here in the upper left-hand corner and switch it from rectangular to freehand. What freehand would do is, if I press down my left mouse button, I can start to click and drag to form my own selection tool. It's very similar to the lasso tool in Photoshop. So if you've used the lasso, the basic lasso, it's kind of similar where you create your own selection. Once you create your own selection, you can move it, scale it. Just click off when you're done. Finally, I have an option called the polyline. Polyline allows me to make, so the freehand is nice in that I can make my own selection. The problem with it is that it's hard to get an exact shape, it's hard. So the polyline allows you to make your own sort of shape that has more harder edges. So if you want to make a more specific shape. So if I wanted to make like maybe a triangle type selection, I can click, and as I click, you can see I can drag out a line. So it's kind of like the polyline geometric tool. And just return back to your starting place. So this is a polyline. Hit return or enter when you're done. There you go. Makes my selection, and I made a triangle. Okay, so this would be good if you wanted a more professional shape that isn't a rectangle, essentially. Okay. All right, so we can make selections. We can move things around. I'm just going to save by going to Save All, and let's load in exercise 7. We're going to talk about the idea of what are called levels. Okay, levels are very similar to what we would call layers in Photoshop. So I'm going to go to Photo P, which is very similar to Photoshop. And you would have something called levels. And you could have levels where you would The idea of levels is the idea that you could have content that's separate from each other, so that you could have separated content and be able to edit the content independently. So for instance, if this green blotch is on one layer and I wanted to use, for instance, some form of eraser, I would erase the content from that particular layer and not from the other layers going on within my composition. So levels is pretty much the same idea. They're just called levels in Tahoma instead of layers. So these are my levels. Like with Photoshop and Illustrator, the way it works is that it goes from bottom up. Oops. So you should think of it kind of like a sandwich, where if you build a sandwich, it's like bread and then meat and then cheese and then bread, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And so I have this project here, and my base level is this red rectangle, and then I have this blue triangles layer that's on top. So the blue triangles block the level that's below it, which in this case is the red rectangle. If I press or click on the yellow circles, this is on top of both of these. I have these drawing layers, and then just this general instruction layer. Okay. So the idea of layers is if I was to draw or erase something, I would only affect the content of that particular level. So for instance, I'm going to go to the yellow circles layer. I know that I'm on the yellow circles because that's the layer that's highlighted or a slightly different color. I'm going to go to my eraser tool, and then if I start to erase, you can see I'm only affecting the yellow circles and not affecting any of the other content on other layers because those layers are not selected. If you want to reorder your content, you can. For every layer you have, there's a little tab at the top where it turns sort of, it might be hard to see, but hopefully I can zoom in a little bit. It sort of highlights and glows a little bit. So let's, for instance, say I want my yellow layers to be, or yellow circles to be on top of the drawings. I could highlight them and drag them up. Dragging them above the drawings makes them on top of the drawings, and everything else corresponds. Maybe I want the blue triangles on top, so I'm going to grab that layer, click on the little tab on the top, and drag it upward. Now my blue triangles are on top, or maybe I just want the red rectangle. So I can take it, click it, and drag it upward. So at any time you can, excuse me, you can always reorder your levels inside of Tahoma. Over here, this thing that kind of looks like a circle, or sorry, a square within a circle. This is your camera stand visibility. So this means whether or not we can see that particular layer. So if you want to turn off content without necessarily deleting it, you may want to turn off the visibility of that level. So for instance, maybe I want to turn off the red rectangle. I can click here, and you can see that turns it off. It doesn't permanently delete it. If I just click back on it, this little icon appears again, and I can still see it within my project. So every level can be independently turned off if you want to. This icon over here is a little different. What this means is that this would be turned off in my project, but if I actually exported my animation, this little icon means it would still be exported in the final animation when you actually render it. So if you're turning this off and you didn't want it to render, you'd also want to turn off the little eye icon as well. You'll notice though that turning just that render button does not affect the layer when it's inside of the program. Okay. Another thing you can do is each level has its own opacity. So for instance, right now my blue triangles are blocking or overlapping the yellow circles and the red background. If I highlight the layer, there's a little option there, and if I go, you can see there's an option that says opacity, and I can make this level semi-transparent, which means everything inside of that level will become semi-transparent. So I made this level semi-transparent. Now you can see through the triangle to the circle and the drawings that are below. Turning it all the way down to 0 would make them invisible. Turning them 100 would make them 100% opaque. Let's say I wanted to add a new, by the way, there's also this lock icon. Using a lock icon on a level will basically mean that you can no longer edit that particular level. So for instance, I locked or put the little lock icon here on the blue triangles, which means I can no longer move that layer or level. So even if I was to say, make a selection, you can see it doesn't actually do anything. I can not use an eraser tool. See, I have that little do not enter sign on it, and I can't draw on it with a paintbrush of any form. Turn it off, and then I can go back to being able to edit that particular level. Let's say I wanted to make a new level. Easiest way is you can go up here. This would make a new level, add new level. You can also go to level, new level. When you click on it, it's going to give you something like this. For now, we're not going to worry about all this. This is where you can give it a name. Let's say I'm going to create a level called green circles. For now, we're just going to keep it as what's called a raster layer. That's usually the default. And I'm going to hit OK. This is also, you also want to see the size of the layer. The layer should typically be the same size as your composition or your scene. In this case, my scene is 1920 by 1080, so that's the size of my level. Hit OK. You can see it adds that level here. And I'm just going to make some green circles. Okay. If you want to delete a layer, simply right click on the layer and go to delete, or use the delete key. All right, try that out. Try using the various selection tools and working with the levels. Try adding a new level, deleting a layer, a level, locking a level, all that sort of stuff.